85% of your long-term outcome in terms of chronic disease is nutrition. Those fork curls, the most important medical decision you make is at the end of your fork.
Now, wait a minute. You need to say that one more time, because that needs to be Facebooked, Instagram, and tweeted everywhere. Say that one more time.
Fork curls. The most important medical decision that you make every day, and oftentimes multiple times a day, is at the end of your fork.
That's Dr. Michelle Neal, March 13, 2018, Functional Medical Institute. Quote her.
So wouldn't it be awesome to have an optimal nutritional type or style that's right specifically for you? I mean, we all know that diets don't work, right? What's the first 3 letters of the word diet? D-I-E. Is there any wonder that when you go on a diet in about 3 weeks, you're like off the diet because you feel like you're going to die, right? So optimal nutrition, the nutrition plan that is specific for you in terms of, carbohydrates and fats or lipids. A lot of us know that we shouldn't eat too much sugar, right? It causes problems. But data to see it in hard fact, sometimes on a sheet in front of you, keeps us away from the cookie jar. Keeps us away from, the fried chicken. Keeps us away from putting those things that go into our body and cause chronic inflammation, sickness, and disease. With genetics, we are actually able to see about the body's detoxification ability. The first method of detoxification is just don't put it in. If you don't put it in, the body doesn't have to eliminate it and take it out. But some systems have a limited ability to detoxify. They're either missing a gene, there's a part of a gene or a deletion that's not there, so we have to make it up with certain nutrients to make the pathway go so that we can actually process and eliminate certain things. It's awesome to be able to know our body's detoxification ability. And we can find out our body's antioxidant requirements. Remember, we talked about just piling antioxidants on board isn't necessarily the right thing to do because we can become toxic or overwhelmed with too many antioxidants. But individuals who are deficient in antioxidants need the right antioxidants in the right amounts. So what about personal vitamin and micronutrient needs? We can begin to understand a personalized micronutrient and supplement plan or need for you. If you took everything that some of the commercials out there said that you should take, you would have a garage full of supplements, right?
Garage? You'd have a house
You'd have a house full of supplements. Some of you may actually have a cabinet full where I need this and I need that and I need this and I need that. We can begin to define and refine the things that you actually need to always supplement with, and then start to chop away the excess and the things that we don't need, or again, we try to lean more towards getting things from food. Some of us have salt sensitivities. It drives blood pressure. We really need to keep the iodized salt out. Others of us, believe it or not, have alcohol sensitivities. We don't have the enzymes that we need to actually break that down. Like one person can handle 1 glass of wine or liquor and the other one can handle 4 or 5 bottles. Doesn't mean it's good for them, but that detoxification process is different in one person versus another. We can also find out about caffeine sensitivities. One person may drink a cup of coffee at 4 o'clock and they're awake till 4 o'clock the next day, whereas the other person might drink a cup of coffee at 4 o'clock and go to sleep by 6 o'clock that night. Different capacities to utilize different substances. And what about lactose intolerance? Believe it or not, that the majority of us are lactose intolerant, and the reason is that when we wean from the breast as babies, that gene turns off. So we have been cultured and raised drinking milk and consuming milk products, and oftentimes our systems are either intolerant to it or we don't have the enzymes to actually utilize it. So we're inflamed and we're gaining weight because we're putting an inflammagen in our system. Even though it might be minute, it's an ingredient in a boxed or packaged product, but it's still going in there in an amount every single day. And the body sees it as an inflammagen and it reacts against it. And the side effect may be resistant weight loss. So nutrigenomics, what is nutrigenomics? Nutrition plus your genetics is nutrigenomics. It's the study of the effects of our individual genetic variation in response to our nutrition and to our exercise. So genetics is the blueprint. What we put on them is how the genes express themselves. So just because you're born with a certain set of genes does not mean that they have to express themselves in a certain way. So if you have genes that say you're sugar sensitive, to make it simple, and you put a lot of sugar on those genes, guess what's going to happen at an early age? Diabetes. If you know that information and we know the problem is sugar, guess what doesn't have to happen? Diabetes. So just because you have a certain blueprint does not mean that the outcome has to happen if we know how to take care of the precious data that we've been given. So we know how important that these factors are and how these genes are expressed. We now know that we can turn them on and turn them off just by how we treat ourselves, how we eat, how we exercise, how we live. So the power is in you to turn yourself into a genetic powerhouse or not.
Genetic powerhouse. That's a good term we haven't used before. How many want to be genetic powerhouses? I think that's a good deal. So when we talk about allergies and sensitivities, I want to make sure that we understand they're two different things. There are very few people that are born with allergies. But sensitivities are often mistaken for allergies, and sensitivities are generally derived from, as Dr. Michelle was saying, genetically, some people just simply do not tolerate refined carbohydrates at all. And the body goes, hey, get that stuff out of here. I don't like it. Has anybody been around a highly sensitive person before? Where no matter what you said, they either got mad or they cried. Like, would you chill out? Just relax, man. All right, do you need some GABA to chill out? Some of you knew what GABA was, some of you didn't. But the bottom line is, we're not born with a lot of these allergies. We are not born with a lot of sensitivities. They get created. And they get created many times because we really are doing the wrong things that our body's not meant to consume. A lot of the things we consume these days in the standard American diet is not food at all. Does everyone realize that? It's just a bunch of chemicals, genetically modified organisms that are not even fit for human consumption. My goodness, we wouldn't feed those to our dogs. How many think that pizza and ice cream are good for you? Okay, we go, wow, but that's what I love. And I would say to you, if you have an animal, feed those to your animal every time you eat them. You're going to watch your animal die. It's going to break your heart. So if it's not fit for, a little spot to eat it, don't feed it to yourself or your grandkids for Pete's sake. Treat people as good as we treat animals. Makes you think, doesn't it? We go to the zoo and those signs out there say, guess what? Don't feed the animals human food. And we don't, because it's gonna hurt those poor animals, the poor babies. We don't want to make the baboon at the zoo die. He's too funny to watch climb up the tree and fall down again. But yet, we do it every single day without thinking about it. Genetics tell us a story. It's time we begin to listen to the way we're created. Okay? Now, as Dr. Michelle was saying, she mentioned lactose intolerance. That's just one of the things we look at, but this is just a simple example. If people take in a lot of lactose, that sugar from milk and dairy, and they're going to have responsiveness to it, over the time that inflammatory response or that inflammatory sensitivity, it's just not going to be isolated to lactose anymore because the body's going to upregulate its immune system all the time to deal with that. And when it does, guess what? Before too long, you're going to have a problem with other things. So I like to start at the beginning, and that's why we use this as an example, because everyone's heard of it. And we're not going into 51 pages of data tonight, but when you understand what foods your body really, really wants, certainly it unwinds a lot of confusion, right?
So what about carbohydrate sensitivity? It helps us understand how our bodies utilize sugar. And this can actually start to reduce the likelihood of gaining, unnecessary weight, or even gut issues, or reducing type 2 diabetes, which is on the rise in our nation. Doesn't it make sense that if the genes tell us that we're carbohydrate sensitive or that we have insulin sensitivity issues, that we should get sugar under control? If that is the cause of sugar diabetes, shouldn't we take the cause out? Shouldn't we get to the root of the problem? So why do we use a Band-Aid if we know what's at the root of the problem? Understanding genes will tell us if we have that root, and then we can get rid of the problem or avoid a future problem. When we get sugar under control, did you know that sugar or type 2 diabetes or diabetes, sugar is like the number one inflammagen? And inflammation is the precursor to all chronic sickness and disease. Everybody say all. Inflammation is the precursor to all chronic sickness and disease. So sugars, when you put sugar in your system, it makes all your proteins sticky. That's why most diabetics are some of the most unhealthy people there are. It creates cardiovascular disease. We start chopping off their limbs, a toe at a time, then an ankle, then a lower limb. And then before we know it, they've lost a leg, and then they're on dialysis, and they've lost their eyes, et cetera, and otherwise. That's all sugar. That's cardiovascular disease. So we can stomp out and decrease the risk for cardiovascular disease. And once we take sugar out, did you know that when your body gets rid of excess sugars, that you stop having cravings? You start to put your body in a fat-burning state. It just naturally starts to burn fat as fuel. So all those sugar cravings is sugar begets sugar. It's like being on a vicious cookie cycle. When you eat a cookie in 30 minutes, because of insulin, the hormone that manages sugar, guess what you're going to want again? Sugar, because your blood sugar is low. Insulin is taking that sugar out. So you're chronically on this craving cycle due to eating habits. So getting on a good precision genetic protocol begins to help your body become less inflamed, managing chronic sickness and disease, and putting you on the train for long-term health and wellness.
Love that long-term health and wellness. So, quick story: a person comes in here in our lobby, and she's actually here tonight. Walks in from her diabetic education class, and she said, "I need some help." And we told her that we could help her, and so she did everything we asked her to, including this particular genetic test here. She put it into practice, and I think she probably was down 60 or 70 pounds, and this is just a few months. She's off all, everybody say all again, all of that type 2 diabetes medication junk. Pretty cool story, huh? And she can tell you who she is in a little bit if she chooses to. Didn't want to light her up too much, but it's always good to see her because she's lost a whole person off of herself. And she, yes, I am. Yes, I am. Let's give her a great big hand right over there, Terry Brown. She did a good job. Everybody's unique in how they burn fat. So when you unwind that, you can really take excess fat off of the system. Case in point, by specific dietary plans, the Paleolithic diet and the ketogenic diet are misunderstood. People are always looking for the magical formula. Those work for some people if constructed properly, but they don't work for the same amount of people, even if constructed properly. Some people cannot tolerate high levels of saturated fat. It's all dependent upon the genes and their current biomarker situation. If you have somebody with atherosclerotic activity or plaque activity going, do you think I want to put a lot of excess fat on them? No, because it's going to dry the lipids even temporarily, and it could cause their life to end abruptly with a stroke or heart attack. So we've got to be very, very careful with that. Understand that one size does not fit all. Remember, 99.9% alike, but 0.1% difference. That 0.1% can be a matter of success and optimization of health, even compared to even death and a drastic mistake. Now, in today's world of these ketogenic diet plans, and I'm not going to pick on that because we typically practice that more or less myself and Dr. Michelle, but many don't understand this, and they fall into the trap of thinking that ketogenic plans are just a bunch of protein, as much as you can eat, and as much fat as you can possibly cram in your mouth, because more is always better. kind of how we view it in America, don't we? More is always better. But we got to be very careful with that because it's a trap. Sometimes elevated triglycerides or elevated lipids can be a trigger that sends us over the edge and starts us in that number one killer process called heart disease. And that's something we all need to avoid because we believe it's certainly avoidable for the most part, just like type 2 diabetes, if we live our life correctly with proper nutrition, proper exercise, proper rest, and proper stress management. Okay?
So your body is detoxifying every single minute, every single hour of every single day. And detoxification is determined by your genetics. Your body's internal organs, like your liver and your kidneys, have phases of detoxification that they go through that require enzymes. And sometimes those enzymes, those proteins, those things can be missing. And the organs of detoxification, if they don't have these enzymes, they can't perform at a high function. So things kind of hang around, the body gets bogged down, and a sluggish metabolism ensues, and we feel slow, we feel foggy-headed, we can't lose weight, in spite of all our clean eating efforts, and sometimes even in spite of exercise, because sometimes if we're exercising too much, that can become inflammatory and slow things down. So if we cannot properly detoxify, we can suffer DNA damage, your body's ability to regenerate and repair. And eventually, if we lose the ability to regenerate and repair, what kind of cells do those cells become? Cancer type cells. And we become polluted, if you will. So can you see why understanding how to fix detoxification issues, if it's as simple as adding certain antioxidants or completing a step in a process of that detoxification pathway, can actually help you? So if there is an allele, remember those SNPs that we talked about, those letters, that alphabet soup? If there is one that is altered, you may be more susceptible to a toxic effect from certain compounds. For example, just grilled meats, those polycyclic hydrocarbons or heterocyclic amines that come from grilling meat, some people cannot detoxify or eliminate them because the phases of metabolism are not working properly.
Will you say that one more time?
Polycyclic hydrocarbons and heterocyclic amines.
I love it when she talks sexy like that.
So your internal organs, they have phases, phase 1 and phase 2, that actually detoxify and eliminate and neutralize the toxins. And if it's not happening, those things can kind of build up and become free radicals in your system and cause cancer and bog your system down. So some individuals do not have the capacity to perform those functions. What may help and what does help is certain allium vegetables like garlic, shallots. What are some other? Onions.
Just don't eat them around your loved ones.
Yep. And, right.
Unless you both eat them, then it's okay. You can cry together and kiss together and you'll still smell bad and it'll be very emotional. Sorry.
Just making sure you're listening.
Yeah.
So, the good news is we can fill in a lot of the gaps if we know what the gaps are by allium vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage. These things have certain components in them that help those detoxification pathways.
Now, we won't stress this too much, but we mentioned it earlier a lot, antioxidants. I use that as an example, and sometimes you can do too much. You got to do the right types. Some antioxidants we take will slow other gene processes down. Our bodies are not designed to be sort of monofunctional. They do a lot of things. Everything works together. Our bodies are a system. If one system messes up or one system is not working, isn't it reasonable to assume the way we work together as a body that some other system might get out of balance as well as the body tries to compensate? So it's important to know, exactly how many antioxidants to take. It depends on your activity level too. Because remember, if you're not sleeping and your stress levels are way up and you are exercising a lot, are you going to create more free radicals than if you are sleeping, are getting the right exercise, and are eating correctly? Of course. So the varying targets of the amount and types of antioxidants are very important to understand.
So omega-3s and inflammation. Sugar creates inflammation. Also, the wrong kinds of oils in your engine can create inflammation. Omega-3 fatty acids are necessary for cellular health. They make up part of the outer membrane of every cell in your body. And genetic testing can indicate if you carry the SNPs or the alphabet components that indicate a tendency towards more inflammation. So those with a higher tendency towards more inflammation are going to need to increase their omega-3 fatty acids. They're going to need more omega-3s to compound or to combat that natural inclination to be inflamed. You know, in the standard American diet, the ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s is 20 to 1. And guess what it should be? 3 to 1. Guess what's in our cell membranes? Omega-6s. Guess how our cells are? Inflamed. So we need to take in more foods that contain omega-3 fatty acids like salmon, mackerel, herring, even tuna. Or vegetarians, you've got the chia, the flax, and the hemp seeds that also have omega-9s in them as well. And then the proper omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is absolutely critical. In fact, every single individual that I have ever checked in the clinic, looked at their omega index, their omega-3 to 6 ratio is off unless they are supplementing or on a very healthy nutritional plan far away from the standard American diet. So the omega-6 index, or the omega-3 index, that omega index is a great marker of cellular inflammation. So if you've never had an omega index done, it really should be a vital sign. It's right up there with blood pressure, cellular health. How healthy are your cells? Do you need more omega-3 fatty acid support? Guess what your brain is made up of? Fatty acids. If you go on a low-fat, no-fat diet, what are you starving? Your brain. So remember, inflammation is the precursor to all chronic sickness and disease, and omega-3s by their very nature are anti-inflammatory. They're like changing oil in the engine of your car. We've got to kind of squelch out that omega-6 ratio so that our cells are healthy.
So the next time somebody calls you fathead, just simply say thank you. Thank you for having great faith in me. Thank you for complimenting me for my intelligence. So much is at the forefront of understanding about methylation. How many have heard that term before? You go on these forums, it's everywhere out there. It's simply not a matter of giving B vitamins. There are multiple SNPs, including MTHFR, methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. There's MTR, MTRR, COMT. They all have functionality. So when you start going through all these genes, it's not as simple as picking one out and saying, I have a disease called MTHFR. We've seen that so many times. Sometimes B vitamins are the answer. Sometimes if we give too many B vitamins, the symptoms can get worse because in the methylation pathway, and we could probably do a whole class on this at some point, we're talking about DNA repair. We're talking about energy production. We're talking about hormone metabolism, neurotransmitter metabolism. We're talking about detoxification. Methylation is an incredibly important area in our bodies. It forms life. It's like the director, the conductor for DNA. It tells DNA when to speed up, when to slow down, when it's making things. It's a big area. So just giving B vitamins just ad nauseum is not the answer. We need to know how much, what type, etc. to give. Everybody's DNA here is different. This is why this area is so critical. There's a giant body of research out here at this moment in time in this area. We could probably spend more than an hour, as I said, on this sometime in the future. But suffice it to say, this area has got to be navigated very, very carefully and diligently because mistakes can be made. But it can also be the greatest area because we've seen people come in here that are so wired up with anxiety because of dysfunctional methylation areas, and we're able to give them the right nutritional protocol, the right exercise, the right vitamins and or minerals, and guess what happens? They don't need SSRIs anymore, which is a pretty cool process. That's antidepressants, if you're wondering.
So what about vitamin D and calcium? Bone health. Genes can tell us about bone health. Variations in certain genes may tell us about cellular receptors. If you have a defective vitamin D receptor, maybe we need to up the vitamin D. That may aid in preventing osteoporosis at some point down the road. Did you know that vitamin D is not just a vitamin, it's a hormone? It also works on the brain. When the sun goes behind the clouds in the wintertime, what happens? We all get depressed. Vitamin D is like an antidepressant. You get seasonal affective disorder. Vitamin D, it's at the top of the food chain as far as being a hormone affecting the brain, being important in bone health. It's not the answer to just take more. We really need to know about receptor function and lab value.
So we know that salt sensitivity is associated with high blood pressure, hypertension. Now, we're not talking about any salt. We're talking about the iodized refined salt that's typically on everybody's processed food in massive, gargantuan amounts. Bleached white salt. Sometimes the people use just general Himalayan or Celtic sea salt. Everything is just fine. But the bottom line is some people are more sensitive than others. If people have a high propensity for high blood pressure and you give them a lot of salt, are they going to get high blood pressure? Likely so. Some people can take it in and metabolize it just a little bit better. The bottom line is, it is nice to know, because hypertension or high tension on our bodies is certainly a risk factor for heart disease, and it's something that can be avoided with lifestyle.